Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today we have professional fiduciary Sara Ecklein to talk about how to avoid the reading of your will from being an Agatha Christie novel. So, Sarah, how are you doing today?
Steve, I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here with you, speaking with
Oh,
your listeners.
I am so happy as well. So before we kind of start in on why this doesn't want to be a murder novel, can you talk a little bit about yourself and how you got to be a professional fiduciary?
Yeah, it's actually one of my favorite stories to share. Really, what originally brought me to this work was end of life care. And I was planning to become a hospice worker after witnessing my first death. And all I can describe it, it was a bit of a spiritual experience. And I noticed that I was really leaning in to being witness to kind of the final days of a loved one's life. And it just had a profound impact on me. And I just knew that this was going to be related to the work that I would do. And quickly I realized nursing wasn't quite the right fit. And eventually my path led me to working for what's called a professional fiduciary, at least in the state of California. We're one of two states that has licensing, and I describe fiduciary, the term a professional fiduciary, as an umbrella term. Under that umbrella, I can act as someone's trustee, as an executor, as a conservator, a guardian, and I can also act as an agent. So, under the power of attorney and also under the advanced healthcare directive. So, even for some clients, I'm their healthcare decision maker as well as managing the financial aspects of their lives. So, it's a lot of meaning. I definitely, describe the work that I do as a calling. There's absolutely not a day that goes by that I don't question my impact in my clients' lives. And I also work with clients in the planning phase where I'll be named in successor roles in their estate planning documents. And that is also why I love coming on podcasts like these and having conversations with other professionals, to really get the word out that there's so much we can do proactively. And it really can have a ripple effect, not only in our life, but future generations. So that's a bit of what I do and why I do this work.
That's perfect. You're the perfect person to be on this because we're going to kind of hit those concepts. I don't want to call them the untraditional, but that people don't think about when they're thinking about estate planning and all of that kind of stuff and having a fiduciary. So which is why we started this kind of goofy title, but we've
Yeah.
seen this. Yeah, we've seen this. I mean, everybody's gathered together in an attorney's office, at the old family home, and the family attorney shows up, and for the first time, tells everybody how much they're getting from the will. Some of the beneficiaries are always happy and some are angry, and they're all surprised. And that night someone's murdered. And it sounds like a novel. It sounds like a novel, but when my grandfather died, we had a relative who complained that he had not been invited to be present for the reading of the will. So that
Yeah.
old-fashioned idea is around and it's still around, but I mean, is it really a good idea?
No, no. And you know what? I feel like so much, that's like the Hollywood movie, like, right? I don't know if you've seen, there's a recent Netflix movie. I think it's called The Life List. It's actually a really great movie, but one of the beginning scenes is exactly that, sitting at the attorney's office and the reading of the will. And boy, do I just want to pull my hair out. It's like the big surprise. And first off, at least in California, this is no longer a common practice. I don't know when it was. Maybe you know the history behind this, but really, beneficiaries or heirs are noticed. They receive kind of a copy of whether it's a trust or a will. So those entitled parties receive it, but there's no kind of sit down and reading of it. So yes, that's when I am administering someone's trust, it is kind of bringing people up to speed because unfortunately, I think because of Hollywood and these kind of ongoing, movies that are continue to have, that's the expectation. That's really not the reality. There's not this dramatic moment. And really kind of going back to when I work with clients in the planning phase, and my approach is like, this should not be a surprise.
Yeah.
Families that plan. So let's just start off with Steve. Only 1 in 3 people in the United States have an estate plan.
Yeah.
That needs to change. Otherwise, I mean, the courts are going to be deciding what happens not only with just your assets, but also even if you're incapacitated, what happens with you. That's where a conservatorship would be required. It really leaves a mess for your loved ones to clean up. And when we can be intentional and proactive, it has such a power to transform ourselves, our families, and I want to argue even the world. If we all
Yeah.
spend time willing to lean in and look at this, and my brain's going a little blank. I know that I was starting off with another trajectory, but yeah, one in
No.
3 people really actually do plan. And what I was finding time and time again in my office, Steve, was that you know the clients that were interviewing me for these successor roles, so these are people that are actually steps ahead of most in
Yeah.
planning. They weren't understanding their documents. There was still this big gap between you know for the clients understanding the purpose of it. And time again, I was finding myself repeating myself of explaining that the estate plan, it isn't only after death. It also includes what happens if we're incapacitated? What if we cannot make those decisions? And I was really surprised that people, because once they're interviewing me, they've already met with their attorney. And I don't know if attorneys aren't taking the time to explain this, if it's just too much information, it's going over people's heads. But that's where, again, I want to, spread the word and the message and really kind of demystify this. I find that the estate plan, like, really is this perfect storm.
Yeah.
And and when I say that, what is this perfect storm, Steve? It's the perfect storm of requiring us to look at our own mortality. And let's be honest, the denial of death is so real and ever present, especially in the United States. We all want to plan, and our brain tricks us that there's always going to be tomorrow, and we know that's not true. The one guarantee.
Yeah. It's funny because you kind of hit on the head. There's one thing about people coming into you after they've been nominated as a conservator or as a trustee or as a personal representative, whatever, um, and say, well, how do I do this? Or, what do we do? And I was looking at some of your stuff that you had written, and you were saying, this is all backwards. I mean, it should start with, I think, the people you want to nominate, knowing what's going on and being ready to do it before they learn it's already been done.
Oh, I mean, that is it. I mean, you should not be naming people in those proxy roles. So let's just define that for listeners or viewers. So when I say proxy, your agent under the durable power of attorney for finance, your agent under the advanced healthcare directive, your executor, your trustee. These people that you're naming should absolutely know that they're being named and make sure that they're willing to act. And then there's so much that we can do kind of after the fact. I don't know if I'm moving too fast for you, Steve, or
No,
if you want to
no,
say
no, this
anything.
is this is exactly it. It's exactly it. And the thing that I really was taken by when we had talked earlier was, there is the legal aspect. There's a legal aspect of what they do, and there is a job, there's an accounting, there's a that. But you were talking about how an estate plan can be so much more than that. it's more, it's about life, it's about wishes, it's about carrying on a legacy. It's all those things that are, aren't dictated by the court. And I love the way you like to want to kind of infuse them into the people that are writing the estate plans,
Yeah,
and the
professionals. Yeah.
beneficiary. Yeah, the and
Yeah.
the and the people who are administering them. I mean, all those people together need a synergy at some point.
It's exactly that. I love that word, Steve. Synergy is absolutely it. And, the plans where things go well, it's absolutely that. There's a synergy and it's not a surprise, right? There's not this big unveiling, this moment like we were talking about before in the movies.
Yeah.
It should not be a surprise of who gets what. I think I also didn't finish kind of the perfect storm of the estate plan, but the one piece is the willingness to look at our own mortality, but the other piece is, right? Our estate plan covers our assets and our money and what we have. And boy, is that still a taboo topic. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where I love working with and speaking with money coaches because money, yes, there's the practical piece of assets, but there's so much more of the psychology that drives this, a feeling that we either have, we a lot of people I think live in, the reality of scarcity, and that's so much of what I think, especially in the US, kind of what drives, this consumption, this overconsumption culture. And so doing our estate plan also requires us to be willing to look at our assets and who gets what. And then, of course, it touches upon our family, right?
Yeah.
Our support, you know, who's going to be doing that. And maybe it's touching upon either, the lack of support that we have. I work with a lot of people that are solo agers. Maybe they've never been married, never had children. And there's obviously a clear vulnerability as we age. We're going to need that support. So that's where, partnering with a professional might be a good fit. Um, but then the other piece, which I find even more common, is that families are dysfunctional. And
Yeah,
as
we're
my
in that business.
yeah, and as my therapist wisely has said, it's not a question of, it's not an on and off switch, your family's either dysfunctional or not. It's really a spectrum,
Yeah.
and so that's where I think having conversations like this, bringing like the estate planning process to light, not behind closed doors, that's going to help people really understand the importance and hopefully know and maybe let go of some of that shame or like feeling bad or I should have this done. Like as much as I do this work too, Steve, like I'm a busy, professional mother. I have a toddler. Oh boy, there's always something going on. And, one of the things that, has been in my head the last year is I want to write a letter to my daughter, kind of that future, imagining her and it'll sit alongside my estate plan. But it's really more of a narrative, a love letter to her of what I want for her and the legacy that hopefully I'll leave behind. And damn, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's
I'm not
hard.
perfect, but this is where I think the more that we lean in and acknowledge that we're human and do our best and plan proactively and partner with professionals that can help us, set up this plan and then ultimately execute this plan and having conversations. This is what goes and part of like this comprehensive holistic planning when things go well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's do you find, and it seems to me that I do, that when someone makes their will, makes their trust, makes their whole estate plan, like you said, who they're going to nominate, there's a reluctance to change. It's like,
Yeah.
I already, it says that, my brother's going to get this and this and this and things have changed, but God, I don't know that, they expect that. I mean, it's like it's an ongoing thing, isn't it? It's organic.
It's exactly that. I mean, Steve, that's one of the main things that I say, and also kind of my final meeting with clients once, we go through my intake process. It's reminding people that these are living documents. They're living documents, so they should be evolving and changing as your life changes. And, let's also be honest and clear that, tax codes, laws, these are also always changing.
Yeah.
So again, going back to like, okay, what doesn't work well? This mentality of we're going to check it off the box, check, we did the estate plan and we're good to go. Shove it in the drawer, never talk about it, never share the documents with the people that need to know, and we'll never think about it again, or maybe we will in 20 years.
Yeah.
No, this is something that we're cultivating. For the most part, I'm hearing anywhere, every estate planning attorney has, their rule of thumb, but anywhere from I've heard as frequently as 3 years, 5 years, as far out as 10 years. But, I think probably if it's been 5 years, it might be worth, reviewing, meeting with your attorney again, making sure, are
Yeah.
is everything in order?
It's funny. I'm sort of an advocate of like, here's the New Year's. Just take a look at it. And it's not just like you said, it's not that you're going to change, a fiduciary or you're going to change the overallness of what you're doing. But and it gets back to what you said about people who don't have a will or haven't done anything.
Yeah.
You don't need to have a lot of money or any money necessarily to have it because you still have things. You have a kid who loves cooking and you have a bunch of cookbooks. And just get people in your conversation and continue to do it like that.
Steve, you raised such a good point. And I think that's, again, part of the collective narrative of like, oh, if you have a trust, you're quote unquote rich. And at least in the state of California, I mean, if you own a house, most likely you're going to need to set up a trust. So, our real estate's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
expensive. So it really is true, that everyone, I mean, once you reach 18, you should start getting your documents in place. But,
Yeah.
not to lead with fear at all, but I do believe it's the most loving thing that we can do. And boy, like becoming a mother, has only like added fuel to the love, the passion, and also knowing the importance and meaning that estate planning does. And really it's something that we continue to look at, in my life, and also for, kind of that next generation. I think setting her up.
So I again was reading something and you use the word, being intentional when you do this. And I really like that. But are there some like practical, simple steps families together can start doing, to avoid the confusion, the conflict, the bad feelings? I mean, I've seen so many families break apart, after the death of, the parents.
Yeah.
What can we do? I mean, if I came in and said, okay, what can we do to make this better so that doesn't happen?
I love this question. And, as I think as much as we all love to have a checklist, as much as we all love to have like, okay, here's the next thing, I don't think it's one thing. So that, that's my, I think, overall message is when things go well, it's not by surprise. This was planned for. And, families that, where the estate plan was done, the conversations were had, accounts were also properly titled, the trust was funded.
Don't get me started
That,
on that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All of this was done not by just, like a one-time thing. This is part of something that families are regularly cultivating. And, how do we do that? I think by, yes, partnering with the right professionals, actually getting it done and executing our documents, acknowledging, our own mortality, really leaning into that reality. Like, let's not, we all feel, boy, do I feel uncomfortable looking at that. I'm fiercely independent. I think if I could do everything myself and live forever, that's how my brain works.
Yeah.
But we have to kind of acknowledge that this is how we're wired, how our brain thinks, and plan accordingly. Um, and then of course there's once we do execute our estate plans, there is a lot of homework. There is a lot of doing. And
Yeah.
I'm finding that, at least I'm based in the Bay Area. I'm finding more and more estate planning attorneys are doing a great job at being educators. I can only speak to my local community, but if you're already working with an estate planning attorney, or maybe you don't, and maybe you're listening to this conversation, you're like, okay, we're gonna start. I'm gonna stop and put it on the calendar in the next month. I'm gonna start interviewing attorneys. Feeling like you can ask the stupid question, you want to be working with that person.
That's
They
my
should have,
job, is to ask stupid
yeah,
questions.
yeah, ask the stupid question. And, if you're working with an attorney that isn't humble enough, isn't, really leading with that teacher's heart, and willing to spend the time with you, you really need to be working with another professional. Um, I really believe that.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and if you're, I also see sometimes where someone, is the executor, and they just kind of throw everything on the attorney's desk and say, okay, do this. And then they feel
oh,
like I no longer have a responsibility. I mean, you were given that
oh,
responsibility. And it seems to me that, and the classic is, I hate to put this on them, but like the old trust the banks, name the bank as the
yes,
trustee. And
yes.
and when you talk to them, they're like, well, we can't, no, we can't we don't want to know what you guys want. We have to do what's best. I mean, that kind of philosophy. But it seems like you're different than that. The part of it is like, can you take a broken estate plan and, like you said, afterwards, after the death, there are things you can still do to help.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, with a broken estate plan, you're usually winding up in court, Steve, right? Don't we know that?
Yeah.
Don't we know that? I do, going to your point about, kind of thinking of the corporate trustee in the bank for, and for some clients, that's still a really good fit. But I'm finding more often than not, um, what's been, at least in my experience, is that corporate trustees are bumping up their minimums. At least in the Bay Area, I'm hearing anywhere from like 3 million to 5 million in assets. And boy, like there's a lot of people
Yeah.
that have less than that, but boy, they still need support. So that's where working with a professional fiduciary might be a better fit. The other piece is that banks can't act as an agent. So again, going back to the Advanced Healthcare Directive, a durable power of attorney. And so what I find is that most people, if they're needing a successor trustee, they're also going to need to have that same person, hopefully, being
Yeah.
named in that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
splitting up the roles, sometimes it can be too many cooks in the kitchen. And I feel like that's where a professional fiduciary might be a better fit for families like that. Um, so
I, I
yeah.
I so agree. The one thing about one person doing it is your right hand knows what your left hand is doing. But
Yeah,
if it's not your left hand, then, I mean, there can be issues when that kind of happens.
that is.
And how would how does it help? I guess I should say, to have like this someone who is not reluctant to do it. Because obviously you're not, but I mean, a lot of people, they, especially on the powers of attorney and things, and the health directives, they find themselves in that spot and are very uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so much work. And I think people don't really, again, where I love having these conversations because I've been doing this work for over a decade. I've administered hundreds of trusts and estates over those years. And it is a lot of work. And of course, that is one of the benefits, I think, of working with a professional fiduciary is that, we have systems in place. We do this all day, every day, where most people are naming, a family member,
Yeah.
and this is the first time they're going through it on top of, they're going to be grieving, once
Yeah.
they get involved, whether it's from having a medical crisis or there's been a horrible diagnosis, whether it's cancer or dementia, Alzheimer's. It can be so much when we're emotionally going through a lot, and then there's just the job to do. So
Yeah.
that is where, partnering with a professional fiduciary um, can be, provide that real support and peace of mind for people, and then allowing family to be family. I also find like, more and more divorce rates are up, and there's, blended families, multiple marriages. And so that's where also working with a professional fiduciary, having a neutral party, and no one feeling like they're, kind of the quote unquote favorite child, that can also provide a lot of peace to a family, and hopefully avoid, conflict, at least to the
Yeah.
most possible.
We have almost just rammed through our 30 minutes already. I'm
Yeah,
I'm I'm so upset about that. I want to do a
this is
whole
so
other one
fun.
just on blended families. I
Yeah,
mean, the
let's do it.
issues about that. But before we go, I do want to ask you uh, if someone wants to get a hold of you, has some questions, wants to talk to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, the best place to go would be my website, which is trustandhonor.co. There's a lot of information just about the services that I provide, and also just better understanding the different roles that a professional fiduciary can act. And I also have a free workbook that I would love to leave listeners or viewers with. And really, wherever you're at in your estate planning journey, whether you haven't done it or you've already done it, I think it's a wonderful exercise for families to go through because it's again going back to kind of where we started of really getting clear and intentional, you know, and and ultimately, hopefully, leaving a legacy of love. What are our values? What are our wishes? And I think that the more that we can get clear on that for ourselves and move from that place versus just from a place of anxiety, worry, or should and shame of like,
Yeah,
oh, I know I need to get this done and check it off the box. But let's really get clear of what's important for ourselves, for that next generation, hopefully for the world, the better that we can leave things for our loved ones.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to stretch this just 1 second because I got to respond to something you said. Is that what you're kind of promoting is maybe you can't force a court to honor your love, but having those letters, having those things, I'd really love this to happen. Maybe isn't binding,
Yeah.
but I think it is something that is followed more often than not. And so it's incredibly helpful to create confusion and the whole ball of wax. So I really think that part of what you're doing is just that sort of extra key.
Oh,
That's
thank you. Yeah, I'm glad it resonates with you. I
it
mean, I found in
totally
my
does.
practice, it makes such a difference. Having those family meetings, willing to have the difficult
Yep.
conversation. Thank you for having me here. This has been fun, and I'm always happy to come back and we can talk
Well,
about whatever topic you want, whether it's blended families or something else.
I got a million of them. I got a million
Yeah.
of them. We haven't even we've scratched the surface, but
Yes.
we've made it so, to the end. And out of time. So sorry about that. But I love the idea of you just sort of talking about, why this doesn't have to be a murder novel, that everybody learns what they get after the death, on some dark and stormy evening. So that just is really wonderful. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh, good. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. And if anyone has further questions on today's topic, you can post it here. We can get you connected with Sara, and you can connect yourself with Sara as well. So until next time, stay safe,